Thank you so much. Whether you are live here in the Sky Lounge or watching back in your room, I am Jason, your cruise host, and welcome to All Access Pass. Broken record time, sitting with another couple of absolute rock and roll Hall of Fame legends, Rod and Colin of the Zombies. Before we get going anywhere, thank you very much, not only for being on the cruise, but thanks for coming up and chatting with us today in All Access.
Pleasure, really. Yeah.
Well, we truly enjoy it. I know it's obvious that you're very unpopular by the sheer amount of people we've put into this room, but we'll do our best. Let's start with something really simple. Last year was a heck of an experience for all the folks on the Flower Power Cruise, and you. Anybody who was not here, Rod and Colin were the only two members of their entire group that did not fall ill. And so we had the most unique and special experience with you guys.
We were so worried before we did it, because it's not that we haven't done acoustic things before, we have. But we normally rehearse them. And we had to get a piano in one of the cabins, and it didn't matter what it sounded like, you know. We just had to go through what we were going to do the following day, and we were absolutely what's the word that I can say politely? I can't remember. I can't think. But in the end,
scared will do.
Extremely polite to say, yeah.
I can remember standing in the wings just before we came out on stage, and I was definitely thinking, you know, we're either going to get away with this or there's going to be real problems here. I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen, but you were a wonderful, wonderful audience.
You really were.
We had a great time.
Well, one of the things I think of all the crowds we have, a Flower Power crowd understands this as much as any crowd, is that life happens, right?
Yeah.
Life happens, and it's what we do with it. It's not, you know, it's the action between there that matters. And the fact that you guys agreed to go out there, and I mean, there's a lot of comfort in having your band. So the fact that you two agreed to go out and tell the stories and do the stripped-down version of all those songs, it was unique, and it was beautiful, and it was wonderful. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Bless you. Thank you very much.
It really was. Is that something that, have you done that since, or did you do it before? I mean, is that something that you guys do?
I don't think we've done it since.
Intentionally.
We're only just recovering. But we've done it before. Gotcha. But it's very much improvised. You know, I mean, we don't have an acoustic show. That doesn't exist. We just stumble on stage, and we probably know the first song. And after that, Rod just starts playing, and I hope I recognize it.
I hope you follow.
Well, there have been occasions, because when you're doing it acoustically, it might have a guitar intro, so he'll just have to busk something on piano. And so we'll be in front of a lovely audience like this, and he's going, you know, plinky plonk 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 plong, and I'm going, I have no idea what that song is. And you just have to hope it comes in the end.
I've never played plinky plink plonk.
I was going to ask that about.
Very first time this happened, we had no idea it was going to happen. We were, it must have been about 2005, something like that, wasn't it, Colin? And we were touring in Holland, and we said, when's the next gig? And they said, well, it's tomorrow. And I said, oh, okay, where is it? And it's at this church. I said, in the church? That's you know, very unusual. Yeah, and it's with an acoustic piano, a grand piano. And I said, well, how's that going to work? I mean, technically. And they said, well, it's just you and Colin. I said, what do you mean it's just me and Colin? And we got in there, and I said to Colin, look, we're just going to have to play this by ear. And I said, and I started to play the piano, and I thought, actually, it sounds lovely in here. The acoustic was gorgeous.
I'm sure.
So I said to Colin, I tell you what, I said, I've got to make use of this acoustic. I'll just play something, and you know, I'll improvise some stuff, and then I'll bring it back to something you recognise. He said, what do you mean you'll bring it back to something I recognise? And he was having real kittens, but actually, it really was very enjoyable, strangely enough.
It was great, and they called it actually the big church. Yeah. And it was like a cathedral. It was a really big place, and there were like 1,000, 2,000 people there.
Oh my!
And we were completely unprepared for this, and we just bluffed it, you know. But I mean, that's what you know. That's what
I think the beauty of being legends, though, and have done this as long as you have, right? And on as many stages, as many situations as you have, there is an automatic reception from the audience. Like, I know I speak for Flower Power when they were so excited. We were so excited that you were there in the first place. We were tremendously excited then that you remained healthy. That even if you can only plinky, plinky, blink, I think we'll take that. We'll accept that.
I'll try that tomorrow night.
Yeah. Just a little plinky, plinky, blink.
It is a thing that, you know, an audience really does lift you.
Sure.
And we had a wonderfully warm and enthusiastic reception when we came on stage. And I think after about 30 seconds, when you get that kind of reaction, you know it's going to be all right.
Settle in.
But if we'd have walked out, I mean, we've done this. We've walked out on stage and there's been 2 people and a dog.
Yeah.
And that's tough. That is really tough.
Was the dog a fan, though? That's the, you know.
He was a fan, but he didn't buy a ticket.
Oh.
I got really, really upset.
Damn dogs.
Yeah.
Always sneaking around. So if you don't mind, let's go back a few years. Let's do a little bit of history before we jump into more current times. Tell us about the early 60s and the forming of the group.
Well, I mean, Rod's looking at me, but really, Rod formed the group. He had, some of you may know, he had a cousin called Jim Rodford, who was in the Kinks for 20 years, and in the Animals, he was in Argent, and he was in the Zombies for a good many years. And Rod's cousin Jim introduced Rod to Jim's band, the Blue Tones, in St. Albans in Hertfordshire, just north of London. They were the big local band, and Rob was about 11, and he absolutely loved it. Sorry, I'm speaking on your behalf here, but I feel like a ventriloquist. You know,
You're just
should be going like this.
careful where you put your hand, Colin. Careful where you put your hand. Yeah. It's not that kind of show.
I agree with that.
You're welcome, Rod.
But anyway, Rod decided he wanted to form a band. He had to wait a few years. He was only 11 years old, and he just got some guys from school who he didn't know. One guy was playing guitar in a folk group, and he just went up to him and said, "Do you want to be in a band?" And the guy said, "Oh, all right." That was the guitarist.
That was Paul Atkinson.
Paul Atkinson. And then the drummer is even better. He was playing side drum in the Army Corps. So he wasn't playing drums. He was this kind of thing. And Rod thought he was the best side drummer. And he went up to him. He's all in Army kit. And he said, "Do you want to be in a band?" He said, "All right, yeah." So that was 3 of them. And then there was a guy who lived in the next road to you, not the same school, who Rod knew, who was making an electric bass in woodwork. He'd never played one. It's not essential. In the Zombies, it's not essential you play the instrument, but
Yes,
you do.
clearly,
But you have to make it.
Yeah.
So he was making an electric bass, and Rod said to him, "Bass, do you want to be in a band?" And he said, "All right." And he said, "I've got a bloke who sits next to me at school, and this is my school, and we had to sit in alphabetical order. The guy who was making a bass guitar was called Paul Arnold. So I didn't have a choice. Being Blunstone, I had to sit next to him. So this is my audition for the Zombies. Paul Arnold is making a bass. He knows Rod. He sits next to me, and he said, 'You've got a guitar, haven't you?' And I said, 'Yeah.' And he said, 'Do you want to be in a group?'
Do you want to be in a band?
Yeah, I said,
Sure.
All right. And that was the Zombies.
That's the most casual band building ever. Just
That's how it came together.
We had our first rehearsal about 2 or 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
And I was the singer, and Colin was the rhythm guitarist. So we went through the first, half an hour. Jim Rodford taught Hugh, the very first, Hugh Grundy, the drummer, the very first kick drum and snare pattern and hi-hat that he'd ever heard, and he picked it up really quickly. And we were away. And then about halfway through, I wandered up to a piano and started playing, didn't I? And I started playing the Bee Bumble and the Stingers' Nut Rocker, yeah. And Colin came racing up to me and said, "Oh, you've got to play piano in the band." And I said, no, it's not that sort of band, really. And so I was very confused. And then...
it's okay, your bassist was too. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then towards the end of the rehearsal session, Colin was putting his guitar away, and he just started strumming a Ricky Nelson song and started singing it. And I thought he sounded wonderful. And I went up to him and said, listen, you've got to be the lead singer, and I'll play piano then. And that was it. We changed chairs on the first rehearsal, and there we were. And then Jim Rodford, who had been wonderful to us, I mean, a real mentor, and he'd loaned us all the Blue Tones gear, and he'd taken me to the rehearsal because I was only 15 years old. I couldn't drive or anything. He later confided to us that he thought, no chance.
He took about 50 years to tell us that. And I was really shocked because I thought we were bloody great in the first rehearsal. It's much better than I thought it was going to be. But he thought, no chance.
No chance.
And he kept that quiet for 50 years.
He was working up to it.
Yeah.
I love the fact that he waited till you guys were uber successful. Then, like, well, I didn't want to break your hearts. Yeah.
The funny thing was that the way we turned professional was we won a beat competition, and the prize was the head of Decca came back to our dressing room afterwards and said, "We would love you to make a single," and we beat Jim's band on one of the finals there. So
was that a moment for you guys?
No, he hadn't said no chance.
He hadn't
at
said
that
it
point,
yet.
no.
That's fair.
If he'd said it. Yeah.
That's fair. And please correct me if I'm wrong. Were you guys the Mustangs first? Is that?
We were indeed.
You were
for probably a week. Yeah. A whole week.
A whole week.
Yes, and then there were hundreds of bands. I know it sounds very trivial, but all bands have to have a name, and you have to spend a bit of time working this out. And I wanted something like Joe Rock and the Thunderballs. So I wanted something.
Thunderballs. I kind of wish you guys were Joe Rock and the Thunderballs. I'm not gonna lie.
I think about it.
I still think he's in the wrong profession.
Yeah.
Is it too late to change our name? But anyway, after the Mustangs, I say, we lasted about a week as the Mustangs. And then to my disgrace, I'm afraid, I suggested the Sundowners. It's a film,
Sundowners,
Robert Mitchum and Thingy Kerr was in the Sundowners, and that was bloody awful as well. So we dropped that. And then the guy who was the woodworker, who was making the electric bass, he came up with the idea of the zombies. And I got to be honest with you, I got no idea what a zombie was. And I still don't. But it stuck, didn't it? It was very, very catchy.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it because I thought, if you think of the Beatles, and the Beatles were making a name a couple of years before they did over here in the UK. So this was beginning of '62. Yeah. And I thought, well, they'd already made a huge impression. And I thought, if people think about the Beatles, they don't think about play on words, or they don't think about insects or anything. They think about John, Paul, George, and Ringo.
Yep.
And I thought if we were lucky enough to get any sort of success, people would reconcile the name with, the people in the band, basically. So that, so I thought nobody else would have that. And actually, another guy who thought no one else would have that was when we did our very first TV show. I got lost, as I still can do these days, actually. I was terribly vague in those days. And our spot was coming up. It was on Ready, Steady, Go. And I was getting a bit worried, and I was sort of running around the corridors. And I heard Miles Davis playing behind a dressing room door.
Wow.
It wasn't really Miles. It was a record of Miles.
Oh.
Yeah. And I knocked on the door because I loved his band around that time. And Manfred Mann came to the door. Manfred said, I said, is that Miles? He said, yeah. He said, you're Rod Argent, aren't you? And I was very flattered that he knew my name. It was our first TV show, I said, yeah. He said, oh, man, I love your record. He said, but you have to change that name. But we never did. And
look what happened. We launched a zombies industry.
Oh, yes.
Unbeknownst to us, there were no zombie magazines, no zombie films, no zombie anything.
It all tracks back to you guys.
It doesn't really. But
The Walking Dead.
But we pretend. We pretend.
Well, Dave, who comes to us from Maryland, says, were there ever any zombie-like costumes or props that you guys considered for your stage appearances?
No.
The name is as far as we went.
Well,
yeah.
I'll tell you one thing. When we first met, it was a Saturday morning, about Easter, Saturday morning, outside a pub. We were too young to go in the pub, so we met outside the pub.
15, yeah.
Yeah, and so I used to play a lot of rugby, and I hadn't met most of the other guys, the side drummer and the folk singer, and Rod. I hadn't met him.
And the woodworker.
I've met the woodworker because I had to sit.
Because you had to sit next to him.
Yeah,
That's
school,
right.
Yes, but I used to play a lot of rugby, and this was a Saturday. On the Wednesday, I broke my nose playing rugby.
Oh.
So when I turned up, I had 2 black eyes and white strapping right across my face like this.
But you look tough.
I looked tough.
You look tough.
I got a lot of respect.
Yeah.
Rod always said he was hoping that I wasn't there to join the band because I looked too rough,
I said to Jim, oh my God, I hope it's not him.
Lo and
Well,
behold.
I think I looked like a zombie anyway.
Yeah, fair enough.
That was where I was going with that.
And now let's fast forward a lot a bit. Let's jump to 2019. Obviously, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm going to ask a rude question. Before that, were you starting to think it wasn't going to happen? Were you starting to have doubts?
Well, Colin was always saying to me when we were on the road, it used to drive me crazy. I mean, even when he was coming up to his 70s, he would say, we'd be somewhere else and there might be a waiter doing a great job. And he used to say, do you know what? I think that might be the profession for me.
Yeah.
You know? And I said, for God's sake, Colin, you're 70
made
years
it.
old. You've got a great voice. I think this is it.
Yeah.
I could be a singing waiter.
Put you in a gondola somewhere in Venice and just have you.
But no, I think, to answer your question,
Yes, please.
I think we were nominated, 4 times
4
before
years,
we were
yeah.
inducted.
4 times.
And I must admit, I did start to think, that,
Yeah.
you try not to think about it too much, but there was a chance that we would never get inducted. So it was fantastic. I can't remember the details of the phone call. I think I was so excited. You get the call, you're inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it is a wonderful feeling because you feel that your peers have
Sure.
noticed what you've done and respected what you've done. And so that's the wonderful feeling. There are 2 votes. There's the members of the Rock Hall, and then there's the fan vote. And the fan vote was nearly 400,000
Yeah, it was over
people.
400,000
So that was-
people, yeah.
That was just incredible.
And that was amazing.
We were so wonderfully supported. And so it was just a very, very exciting evening. It was at the Barclays
Center,
Center
yeah.
in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
in front of 17,000 people. And Stevie Nicks, Janet Jackson,
Yeah.
The Cure, Radiohead, Roxy Music, and Def Leppard,
Yeah.
and us.
And the zombies. And the
Yeah.
Mustangs.
And
Yeah.
the Mustangs,
Yeah.
It was great. And Susanna Hoffs gave the induction speech, and she gave such an eloquent speech. She was absolutely magnificent. And I was so grateful and thrilled that she was able to do that. She was wonderful.
It was good.
But there were two things that happened that year that made me think that this 4th year might be the one. The first thing was, as Colin's already mentioned, the fan vote, and it wasn't manipulated in any way, but the fan vote had gone up by that 4th year to about 400,000, which seemed absolutely extraordinary. So it was way up there. But the second thing was, it was a sort of reaction of our peers, in the sense that some quite famous people started
Campaigning for you.
Yeah, they were talking about it, but they were coming along to our concerts and coming backstage afterwards, So that was lovely, and people started saying some really great things about us. People like Dave Grohl, Tom Petty, who else, Cole?
John Prine was
John Prine, he said vote for the Zombies. Which
over me, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He did. And in the UK, there's a very big star called Paul Weller, who always names Odyssey and Oracle, our last album, as his favourite album. And if you haven't heard it, he will go into a shop and buy it for you. And he's one of the
He was
biggest
doing
artists.
that, yeah.
He's one of the biggest artists in the UK.
He's responsible for all your album sales.
Yeah, he
Just
is.
one by one,
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Just all the folks on the street.
So that was really great, and I always remember just one tiny incident. A few weeks before, we were over here in the States, and Colin and I went into Sirius XM to do some promo, and we saw Don Felder in from the Eagles in the.
He was here last week.
Okay, cool, very cool. And he came up. He came up to us and said, "I've just voted for you," And I thought, "Oh, that's really lovely," But it was just little straws in the wind like that, and I suddenly, dared to think we might actually get in this year. But I do agree with Colin. I think that was the last. I think they would have got fed up with nominating us after that.
They might have done,
They reached the point where they start to, okay.
Yeah.
Well, Tim from Ohio says, do you guys have any fun stories from the night of the induction that you can share?
Well, this is a bit musical, this one, actually. But,
fire away.
One of the nice things about Def Leppard, they came up to us before the show and said, would you join us because they finished the show, and they said, would you join us and do a version of All the Young Dudes, along with some other people that they had there as well. But I think we were the only people from the other artists that they asked on stage that were on the show.
I think so, yeah. I mean, Susanna Hoss came up and sang backing vocals with us, and a couple of other people who are associated with the show. But I think we were the only people, inductees, who got up there. Of course, Brian May also got up and played.
Yeah. And
that guy.
Yeah,
that guy.
he's a phenomenon. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Actually, when we were on the red carpet beforehand, you all got shunted into a room, and there were the sort of original remaining zombies in the room, and suddenly we realised that Brian May was standing with us in the middle, and we thought, what's he doing here? He did
joining the zombies.
He did the interview with us. But when we got on stage to do All the Young Dudes, I said, great. And I said, what key are you doing it in? And they said, D. And they started playing. I said, that's not D, that's C sharp. And they said, oh, no, we've tuned down. So I had to play this flipping thing in C sharp, which was a bit difficult, but it was good fun. It was great.
But you got there.
I got there, yeah.
And I had to sing it's pretty simple, but the chorus of All the Young Dudes. I mean, there's no rehearsals for this, and there's 17,000 people out there. And I know that song vaguely, I could bluff it. All the young dudes, blah, blah, blah. But I got this far away from the mic. No one could hear what
as long as you look like a rock star, no one will doubt you ever. Yeah.
Who cares? Because I didn't really know the words, so I just did the best I could.
That's fantastic.
Move your hips a bit.
Yeah. Wave an arm or two, and
One tiny thing to mention was when we were on stage, I looked into the audience, and as Colin says, 17,000 people, and I saw Mick Fleetwood sitting there. And I remembered that the very first gig we ever did outside St Albans as a semi-pro group was a place called Kingston Bars. There were about 10 people there, and we were on with a band called The Shanes, and the drummer in that band was Mick Fleetwood.
Mick Fleetwood.
Yeah.
You got to love how a lot of it comes full circle in its own way, right? Is it true? I mean, Odyssey and Oracle is routinely rated as one of the top 100 albums of all time, in all music. Absolutely. Silly question, and again, please correct me. Is it true that it was misspelled accidentally on the cover?
It was accidental, but it wasn't us that did it. I have to say that. There was a guy, there's a wonderful artist called Terry Quirk. At that time, Terry was great. Unfortunately, he passed away very recently. But I shared a flat with Chris White at the time, and the third room was held by Terry Quirk, who was a great friend all his life of Chris White. And Terry had an idea for our album cover, and he showed us, and we absolutely loved it. It was very psychedelic. It was really arresting. We thought it was great. And we were just about to go on tour for 2 weeks. So we went on tour, and we said, yeah, carry on with that. That's fantastic. It's absolutely lovely. Now, Terry was a teacher. He's been a teacher all his life, right?
So he has no excuse for this story.
No excuse at all. But anyway, we got back, and we got a phone call from the record company, and they said, we'd like you to come and approve the cover. So Chris and I went along to the record company, and we looked at it, and we said, okay, we think it's absolutely gorgeous, but if you can just change one letter, that would be fine. And they said, well, it's too late, it's gone to print,
Could you come approve it?
I said, well, why have you got us here? Yeah. So that was the story of that. But for years, I quickly made up a story and I said, actually, it's intentional.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Because it's like a journey in song, so it's ode,
Ode.
and Odyssey, which is a journey, so that's what it is. And then about 1990, I was doing an interview with Colin, or it might even have been later than that. I think it was when we just joined again, I think about 99. And I suddenly decided to tell the truth. and I said, what had happened, and he'd misspelled it. And Colin looked at me. He said, my God. I said, I had no idea.
It's about 50 years he's been telling me this strange story. It never made any sense. It's an ode. I go, what? Excuse me, what the
ode
is an ode? I've got no idea what an ode is. And this lame story. And I believed all of it. And then suddenly he told me after 50 years, the guy spelt the bloody thing wrong. As simple as
On
that.
one of the greatest albums of all time. That is fantastic. Tim, who comes to us from via Detroit. Forgive me, Tim. I can't. Inlet Beach, is that right? Inlet Beach, there he is. Odyssey and Oracle is one of the greatest albums of all time. My favorite cut, Cell 44, has got to be the happiest prison song of all time. How did this come about? Absolutely brilliant.
How did it come about? Well, I started to write the song, and I really liked it, but I thought this is just turning into another love song, a sort of a standard sort of love song. And I thought, I've got to try and put a twist on it. And then I started thinking about, I must have seen something in the paper or something about someone coming home from prison. And I thought, well, that's a really nice story, and it's really valid. And, people make mistakes in their life, and it would be really heartwarming to have a really good view on something and saying, I know you've made a mistake, but I can't wait for you to get back and start the relationship again and change your life and everything. And I thought that would be a good twist on it, really. I mean, it's as simple as that, really.
There you go.
I always thought that was the most commercial track on the album, and it was released as a single, and I don't think it sold half a dozen copies, And Time of the Season, I never really liked Time of the Season. It sold 2 million. So I'm not going to be an A&R man in my next job.
Shows what you know.
Yeah, I'm going to be a singing waiter, definitely. A&R man's gone.
Well, it's actually one of the questions in here, and I kind of shuffled through, and I'll come back to it. Forgive me, I'll grab your name in a moment. Was exactly that. It was, are there any cuts that you thought were going to be big that weren't, and then some that you were shocked were hits? We already know Colin's answer.
Well, I can honestly say that I said to Chris White, as I said, I was sharing a flat with him, and Time of the Season was the last thing to be written on the album. And I remember playing it over to Chris in the flat and saying, I think this could be a hit. I mean, no one else shared my view, including the record company. I have to tell you, it was only Al Cooper that got it released. Clive Davis did not think that was a commercial cut at all. But that sort of thing has followed us around our career. I mean, when we made She's Not There, the record company liked it, but they didn't think it was commercial. So they shunted it onto a subsidiary label from their main label. And that happened really with Odyssey and Oracle. I mean, Clive wasn't going to release it, and then Al Cooper said, "You've just signed me as an A&R man." And he was the hottest A&R and producer person in the world, I think, probably at that moment. And he said, "You've got to release this album." And so he did release it, but then he chose the first 2 singles and said, "Well, look, we've given it a chance. Nothing's happened, so we're going to leave it now." And Al said, "Please listen to me just one time and release Time of the Season." And they released it, and even then, no one was playing it at first, but then this guy, and if anyone sees the documentary, which we've just had made, which is a beautiful documentary, actually, it's done by a guy called Robert Schwartzman of the Coppola family, and it's executive produced by Tom Hanks, in his company, his own company. So we were very excited about that. But I've lost my train of thought completely now, sorry.
In the documentary, it explains that just one DJ in Boise,
Idaho.
Boise, Idaho.
Yeah.
He
Of all the places.
Yeah.
Yes. He started playing Time. It's just one DJ. started playing Time of the Season. Otherwise, it would have been all over. And he would not stop playing it. And there was a ripple effect. It came out from that one guy. And then suddenly it's been played all over the country and it starts to come into the charts. It was a really long, drawn-out thing, almost as long as this story. And then it took months, and then it got to #1 in Cashbox, and I think #2 or #3 in Billboard, but we don't talk about Billboard.
No,
we only talk about Cashbox. It was #1.
And it was actually #1 50 years to the very day when Cashbox chart was published before the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction.
Yeah.
As we were in
Same day,
Very
right?
same
Yeah.
day, 50 years later, yeah.
That's a wonderful full circle story. Emil was who asked that. Sorry, Emil, I didn't have your question in front of me. Emil was curious about the hits. Shulamit, is that correct, from Israel? Shulamit, did I say that right? She's not there, ... Who is she?
That was a song that I wrote that because we'd won this beat competition. We had a recording session in 2 or 3 weeks' time, and the guy that was going to produce our session said you could always try and write something for the session. And I'd only ever written one song before, which we actually did on the beat competition. So I went away and wrote She's Not There, and Chris went away and wrote the song that was going to be on the B-side. And I had to get it done very, very quickly. So I got a pile of my recent albums out, one of which was an old John Lee Hooker album. And there was a song on his album called No One Told Me. Now, I stress that apart from those words, No One Told Me, nothing about the John Lee Hooker song has anything to do with She's Not There. But I just thought that was a phrase which tripped off the tongue, and it enabled me to start thinking and start building a story around those words. And I had a very clear idea in my mind about musically the way I wanted to put the song together. Wanted to end on a really big climax on a major chord and then swoop back down again to like a minor blues phrase. And that really... so I'm sorry, there's no real person.
There's no she.
I should just say that if any I mean, some of the people here will know this, but the same with Time of the Season, nearly wasn't released. She's Not There nearly wasn't recorded because we'd been booked in for an evening session at Decca Studios in West Hampstead in London. And unfortunately, the recording engineer, he was a really, really good engineer, but he'd been at a wedding all day, and he was absolutely blind drunk.
Just pissed.
Absolutely blind drunk. But worse than that, he was really, really aggressive.
Oh,
so look,
that's not
we were
good.
only 18. It's our first time in the studio. And you put these headphones on, and this guy was screaming obscenities down the headphones. I've only just walked in the studio. You know,
Yeah.
this guy,
Good morning.
oh, yes, all these words. And it makes me laugh because we've been doing this for like 60 years now. But after 20 minutes in that studio, I knew that business was not for me. I thought, I don't want any more of this. But then we had a bit of luck, and he collapsed. He was out cold, and we carried him out. One zombie on each arm, and one zombie on each leg. Up 2 flights of stairs, into a black London taxi, and never saw him again. Never saw him again. And his assistant took over, who people may know this name. His name was Gus Dudgeon.
Yeah,
That was his
I do know that
assistant.
name, yeah.
And he went on to produce all of Elton's
Yeah,
early
Elton.
albums, David Bowie, Kiki D.
Yeah.
And that was Gus Dudgeon's first session ever on She's Not There. And it was our first session with Gus. And he's no longer with us, but he never forgot that was his first session.
There's so much magic to the history of rock. There's so many things that just barely came to be, whether it's the forming of a band or a certain song. Or I think that's what's most beautiful about the art is it's rarely like, oh yeah, we put this together, we wrote it in 4 days, and then it was a massive. It's always, well, he got drunk, we had to get rid of him. The assistant came in. This guy made a bass on the lathe. Then we found that guy because phonetically he was sitting next to him, and like. The fact that, 60 some odd years later, as you mentioned, you're now Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, deservedly, and top 100 album of all time. I think that is just the most fantastic story. The whole thing. It's just beautiful. I just love that. I love it. I love it. Isn't that cool? Absolutely cool. Steve comes to us from Virginia. We love you. Glad you could perform this time, all of you, that is. When are you going to perform at Wolf Trap or anywhere close to D.C.?
Well, we have our manager in the room at the moment. Chris, when are we going to play there?
Chris isn't sure yet, but noted.
Yeah.
Ken comes to us okay. Ken comes to us from Wilmington. Your misadventure with the van breakdown in the desert was only one of the van issues in zombie travel, right? Didn't your van once hit a deer in the middle of the night between shows?
It did. We'd just done the Jimmy Fallon show, actually. Literally. I just thought I'd put that in, name drop.
Yeah.
And we were driving away from there, and we seemed to drive away very slowly. There were all sorts of dramas. And it always struck me, if we'd have just got away from that show quickly, this poor deer wouldn't have got smashed. But I mean, he pretty much came through the windscreen. It was horrible for him, and I've got to be honest.
It wrote the van off, didn't it?
It wrote the van off. It wasn't great for us. But again, it's just chance, isn't
Sure.
it? If we'd have got away early, that wouldn't have happened. But it was very scary.
I can imagine. Eli comes to us from, is that Indiana? Eli? This question is for Rod specifically. Do you think the first incarnation of Argent would have worked out with you, Hugh, your cousin Jim, and Ricky?
I've absolutely no idea. I mean, well done for knowing all those facts.
Impressive.
But
Who's Ricky?
he was. We originally worked with him
Burkett.
for 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
2 or 3 months. Actually, Gus suggested him.
Oh, okay.
Strange enough, but yeah,
I'm
I don't know what
learning
happened
things
to
up
Ricky.
here. I'm learning things.
Yeah. Do you know what happened to him?
I don't.
No.
No.
Anybody here know what happened to Ricky? No.
Colin didn't even know they misspelled the album, so why are you asking him? Let's not. Let poor Colin live in peace over there. He has no.
I've got a lot of things to tell him later.
Clearly,
this
yeah.
evening,
Buckle in, Colin. There's a lot of things coming your way, my friend. Judy Ann comes to us from Massachusetts. How do you two, this is a good question. How do you two keep your professional relationship so strong, even in times where undoubtedly you may have disagreed or maybe musical direction discussions? Are there any examples that turned a song into something better after airing some differences?
I don't think
think
so,
of one.
actually, but I can't think of one. But the thing is that, strangely enough, I mean, we did get on well from the very first day we met, actually, strangely enough. And
Even though he looked like a tough with a broken nose and 2 black eyes.
yeah, I was very tolerant in those days. Yeah.
I was very tolerant.
But I don't know really. I mean, Chris Wyatt recently said it's extraordinary that we've all the original zombies as well. From the first incarnation, we've all remained really good friends throughout all these years.
Wonderful.
We've never fallen out.
That's wonderful.
I don't know why. I mean, I think that when we travel, all these long journeys in usually a vehicle rather than the plane. I mean, planes have become such a drag these days to actually do anything. In the old days, it was really, really easy. You'd turn up 10 minutes before the plane, on local plane journeys, before it left, and you just give your ticket in and you'd be on the plane. It was like catching a bus, but it certainly is not like that now. So we travel in the vehicle wherever possible, but I think we give each other space in the vehicle, don't we? There's not a lot of sort of continual speech, sometimes we have a laugh and things go on, but we are very careful to give each other space. But we just naturally do it, and the personalities have just fit. It's the most extraordinary thing that 5 guys initially got together and just got on so well musically, as well as in every other way. And part of that is to do with what Dave Grohl said, I think. He said, just get a few friends, go into a garage and suck. And, and we did, for a while, for 3 or 4 months. But we were really passionate about music, all of us, and that was a huge piece of fortune as well. It was a great piece of fortune finding someone with a voice as special as Colin's.
Thank you. But going back to the original question of what I've forgotten exactly what it was, but it was about we argued.
Why do you get along?
Did we ever argue
Yeah.
to make something better?
Yeah.
And the thing that I know some of the people have heard me say this before, but with Time of the Season, it was the last song that was written for the album, and I didn't really know it that well. It had been finished in the morning, and we were recording it in the afternoon. We had a very small recording budget, and we were running out of money. And it happened where I was recording, I had a big clock in front of me with a red light underneath it, so it's not very subtle. Red light's on, that's money's being used, and the clock's going around. And Rod was kindly coaching me.
Very kindly.
Kindly coaching me.
Gently.
From the control
Very
room.
kindly.
And we forgot, we've got headphones on, and we forgot there were other people around, all the Abbey Road people, and
Sure.
of course the band. And Rod's going to me, no, that phrase, can you sing that on the beat? And that next phrase, can you push that? And this is going on and on. Now, we developed very quickly into very bad language, so I'll just bring it down a little bit.
He said, if you're so fucking good, you come and sing.
I think you can see where this is going. I'll use another word. I said, if you're so bloody good, you come in here and you bloody sing it. And he said to me, you're the bloody lead singer. You stand there till you get it bloody right. While I'm singing, it's the time of the season for loving.
That's fantastic. I'm sure it puts you right in the mood to sing those lyrics, Colin. Yeah. Nothing says love like pure anger at that moment. Debbie comes to us from Florida, and please say no, but do you guys anticipate retiring in the near future?
No.
Yeah, there we go. There's a couple left here. Patsy comes to us from Texas. Whenever you hear your songs inevitably playing on either the loudspeakers or overhead or in a commercial or something, are you ever tempted to sing along?
No, I count the money, actually, rather than the lyrics.
Another one.
Yeah. No, yeah, maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit. I tell you what does happen. If a song comes on and people know it's you, they all look at you and they want you to react.
Sure.
And if anybody can tell me what you're supposed to do, I feel like I want to do a soft shoe shuffle.
Soft shoe something.
Yeah. I don't know what to do, if it comes on and everybody looks at you and you just go,
You quickly look at the person behind you. Yeah,
Just occasionally you go into a restaurant or something and someone realizes who you are.
Sure.
I mean, just very occasionally that happens. And then they'll start putting your songs on. And I hate that, actually.
The last thing you want to do when you're trying to enjoy a meal
Yeah.
is then listen to,
Yeah.
especially time of the season. You know how angry you were during the recording of that, so you don't need that memory. Caro from New York City, the Zombies had 2 Pauls in the band. Why on earth did you hire another Paul?
Well, what's she got against Paul?
Yeah, what's wrong with Pauls? Makes it easier. And actually, that's actually, the rest of it you already answered. Rod, what did Colin do to become the lead singer? But you already talked about that. So let's jump to very currently. We had a special event today, a somewhat reserved event, and we'll get you out of here after this. Tell us about the new music that the Zombies have coming out here.
It was a great joy recording this album. It really, really was. And actually, we wanted to go back to the situation we had with Odyssey and Oracle. Now, with Odyssey and Oracle, it was a completely in-house production. Chris and I wanted to get, for better or worse, we wanted to get the way we saw our songs down onto record. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that another producer can't do something that's great, but it's his vision, basically. And we've had some great producers in our recent albums. The last one we particularly enjoyed, Still Got That Hunger, Chris Potter. He put his own stamp on it.
Sure.
And we really liked some of the tracks on that, but we really wanted to once more. I particularly felt, I wrote most of the songs on the album, and I wanted to get, again, for better or worse, my own ideas of what those songs should sound like, as close as I could possibly get them. And so we did it in my studio, which actually acoustically was designed by the guy who designed the Abbey Road studios.
Fantastic.
A guy called John Flynn. And it's only a small studio, my studio, but it's big enough and it's set up completely for me and for us. So that I don't have to get anyone else in there to break down everything, It's all just set up for that, and it's completely designed for that. And we had a ball, and we tried to, I think I might have said this earlier in the day to anybody that was there, but we wanted to, particularly after the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the way the band was playing up until the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I thought was better than ever, we wanted to record in a very old-fashioned way, all together, as live as possible, so that the musicians could bounce off each other in a very old-fashioned type of way, that we would always have Colin's lead voice so that we could react to what he was doing, he could react to what we were doing, and they were only meant to be guides, but in the end, they turned out to be, more often than not, the actual lead vocal that we used. Same with the solos. We meant to replace them later if we had to, but we didn't, because it was just about that magic of capturing something special. And we had a ball doing it. I mean, it went over a long period of time because of COVID, and it meant that we couldn't do that for a long time. But that long time also gave me the chance to write the material for the album. So I could if I got too close to what I was writing, I could just go away for 2 or 3 days and then come back, and the studio was set up exactly as I'd left it, and I could just carry on. And that was an unlooked-for advantage, really. And we finished the album eventually. Most of the tracks, like on Odyssey and Oracle, were recorded in about 3 or 4 hours when we actually did the basic tracks. That's not to say that we didn't come back to them and maybe double track some harmonies and do, but we deliberately didn't overdub very much. We wanted it to be an honest and true and sort of, when it needed to be, a muscular sort of version of what we were doing, because we didn't want to be a band that drew down the energy level, like many sort of vintage bands sometimes make very nice albums, but they're sort of toned down a little bit. We didn't want to do that. And I must say that the album comes out on the 31st of March, and we've done the initial interviews for it with the industry, obviously, and all over the world we've had the most extraordinary reaction from Germany, Australia, America. Some of the initial reviews that are going to be published are just fantastic. So we're really crossing our fingers, because we're still doing it for real. We really are. That's why we're doing it.
It's not phoned in. It's not. Yeah. I was in the room today when you guys were doing the listening party, and it's just beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
It's stretched. Like, one of the things I like, though, ultimately, and my opinion means nothing in this situation, but you didn't stray too far from your sound. Also, it still sounds like the Zombies.
Well, I don't know any other way to write. So I mean, and we're doing it because we wanted to keep creating. That's why Colin and I got back together again. Yeah. I mean, at first, we not only didn't make any money, we did 6 gigs for pleasure, and we were capitalizing whatever we did. When we first came to America, we had to capitalize the trip. Yeah. And when we first played in Georgia, we played to 12 people in the audience. And we play there now, and we play to maybe 2,000 people.
And a dog.
And a dog.
Yeah, and a dog.
Same dog.
Same dog.
Yeah.
Still going strong. You made a comment, and before I hand over to Colin, you made a comment about in today's listening party about Colin's voice. Yeah. Still today.
I think it's extraordinary. I mean, I do remember when we were first getting back together again. Colin was saying, "Oh, we've got all these gigs coming up." When we started to get some more, I'm a bit worried about. Or he'd already started doing solo gigs, so I'm a bit worried about keeping my voice and not losing it and all that sort of thing. And I said, well, you should go to this this teacher. And there was a teacher that I've been going to. It was because I did a solo album, and I thought my voice was far weaker than it should have been. So actually, Andrew Lloyd Webber said to me, you should go to this guy. So I went to this guy, and I said to Colin, you should go to him. And Colin said, well, no, I don't want to change my voice. But I said, you won't. It would just give you the ability to keep singing, to make it stronger, but it won't alter how you feel about what you're singing. You know, it's not to do that. It's not to change your voice. Sure. It's like an athlete, you know, has to keep training, if you like, and particularly as you get older, if you want to keep it, you can, you know. And he does it so religiously now. It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, when we're on the road and doing lots of gigs, he'll do his warm-up, which is 30 minutes long, exercises. He'll do it at least twice in the day and sometimes a third time before we go on. And it's that's kept the voice in such a shape that in some ways I think it's stronger now. It's changed a little, but I think it's stronger in some areas than it was, you know, when he was 18, 20s, 30s. And it's fantastic.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
So, Colin, I'll allow you to take us home here. 2 questions then for you. One, how do you feel hearing your good friend say that about you and your vocal quality?
Well, I mean, I'm because we're pals, we don't normally talk in those sort of terms, you know. So it's lovely for me to hear Rod talk like that, because even at 15, Rod was an extraordinary keyboard player. And now, I mean, you can listen to Rod's done a wonderful CD of classical pieces. He's a master of the keyboard, you know. And so it's wonderful that he would say those things. And I can assure you that doesn't, you know, we just don't talk in those terms that much, you know. But I would say...
Mates rarely do,
No,
Mates don't usually speak.
No,
it's usually,
they don't.
get out of the way,
But just on a personal level, I would reciprocate and say that I always feel safe and secure on stage when Rod's playing. I know that, you know, every once in a while, I know something's going to go a little bit wrong, but between us, we can always save it, and hopefully the audience won't even... The audience might think, oh, what was that?
That's new.
And we can save it, you know. So it's great to be working with him. We've grown up together. Rod often says he learnt to write songs for my voice, and I learnt to sing professionally with his songs. We've gone through our formative years together. We've gone through the ups and the downs. And so here we are now, probably in the autumn of our career.
Well, he certainly is.
That's how mates talk to each other,
We're in the autumn of our career, and, you know, it's great to be just plowing on, and we're just having fun.
Well, you guys are both absolutely fantastic. You're obviously legendary and humble, and to be here and give us your time and your energy and your talent, truly appreciated. My friends, help me thank Rod and Colin, a.k.a. The Zombies.
Thank you.
Join us for another trip back to the 60s on the 2024 Flower Power Cruise. Our lineup features the legends of the Love Generation, including the Rascals, Tommy James and the Shondells, John Kay of Steppenwolf, Randy Bachman, founder of Bachman-Turner Overdrive and the Guess Who, the Moody Blues' John Lodge, the Family Stone, Gary Lewis and the Playboys, the Grassroots, the Buckinghams, the Box Tops, the Cowsills, the Vogues, cruise host Peter Asher, A Spoonful of Love, and more to be added. Get to know the artists at interactive events, including Q&As and panel discussions, game shows, and more. Plus, travel back to the era of bell-bottoms and tie-dye during nightly theme parties under the Caribbean stars. Departing from Miami March 21st, 2024, on the luxurious Celebrity Summit, and making stops in the beautiful ports of San Juan and St. Croix. Flower Power Cruise sells out each year, so don't wait. You don't want to miss the next grooviest trip at sea.